There's a political strategist as well. Tell us, Theo, how important Keir Starmer is at the moment in all these discussions in regard to Ukraine, do you think?
The way forward in Ukraine is not to continue to give them a bucket load of money and let them waste it all and just fire missiles at the Russians to no avail because the Russians have taken 20% of their land. The smart thing to do is to try and find some kind of peace.
In Ukraine, should it be deemed necessary, but of course they want that backstop, that security backstop from the United States. But in the wider picture of where we find ourselves right now, the Prime Minister's statement says it all. The ball is in Putin's court. He needs to decide to come to the table. And
we spoke a lot about Keir Starmer and his coalition of the willing. It looks as though the coalition of the willing has now gone down the gurgler because Donald Trump's just gone, well, I don't know what you people are talking about. We're not doing that. You've even admitted that you can't do anything without America. So why don't you do something with America?
Imagine being a Prime Minister with a legal background, only to be publicly told to mind your place by the country's top judge. That's exactly what happened to Keir Starmer when Baroness Carr issued a remarkable statement condemning his criticism of a court ruling involving a Palestinian family seeking refuge. This isn't mere political theatre, it feels like the makings of a constitutional crisis. Starmer, the former director of public prosecutions who built his reputation defending the rule of law, now faces accusations of undermining judicial independence to score points on immigration. The real question is whether this unprecedented judicial rebuke will prompt a course correction, or whether it signals the start of a troubling new precedent. Before we go further, a quick request. If you value this content, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. More than 98% of viewers watch without subscribing. It costs nothing, yet it makes a huge difference to us. Have you hit subscribe? Brilliant, thank you. Now, back to the story. How did we reach this extraordinary moment? A former director of public prosecutions, now Prime Minister, publicly challenged by Britain's most senior judge. The seeds of this clash were sown in what appeared to be a routine immigration case, one that has since expanded into something far more consequential. At the centre of the storm is a Palestinian family from Gaza, whose case has ignited a fierce debate over the boundaries between politics and the judiciary.
And negotiate with primarily Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. So, yes, Keir Starmer is trying to cement his position amongst European leaders, but the real negotiations, the ones that really matter.
Quite what that collection of beanbag politicians from Europe thought they would achieve by getting together on Sunday is beyond me.
They all fancied a trip to London, I suspect.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah. But anybody with any semblance,
Moscow and Putin's team representing Russian interests.
Peter, where are we with this, do you think?
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm just going to echo what Theo said, that Starmer is positioning himself amongst European leaders, but in reality, what is he actually achieving? This coalition of the willing,
of grey matter between their ears, knows that this matter will only be resolved with some input from America.
Exactly.
Donald Trump.
And with America leading the way, frankly.
The Palestinian family, whose home had been destroyed in the ongoing conflict and with nowhere else to turn, sought refuge in the UK, where relatives were ready to support them. With few options available, they applied through the Ukraine Family Scheme, simply because it was the only online route they could access. This wasn't about gaming the system. It was about survival. When their case reached the courts, a British judge ruled they had the right to join their family under human rights law, specifically Article 8, which protects the right to family life. This was not judicial activism or overreach, but a judge applying protections that Parliament had already enshrined in law, with the ruling noting it was an exceptional case that wouldn't rewrite immigration rules or open floodgates. Yet, Keir Starmer chose to politicise the decision, standing in Parliament and declaring that he disagreed with the ruling, calling it completely wrong and insisting it could not stand, framing the case as a misuse of the scheme. These were not casual remarks. They were a direct challenge to judicial independence from the highest political office in the land. The irony is stark. Starmer, who spent years as a human rights lawyer and later as Director of Public Prosecutions, championing the very legal principles he now seems willing to undermine, has shifted from defending the rule of law to publicly criticising it for political convenience. A transformation that raises profound questions about principle versus power.
You know, a lot of people, a lot of these nations...
Well, there's quite a few members of it.
There's a few members, but what are they actually going to contribute? I mean, like, obviously Poland...
But they don't know what they'd be contributing for yet. We don't know about peacekeeping troops yet or not.
We're all still very vague on the details, when everyone seems to be making the right noises.
Yes.
Right.
So it's all wishful thinking, grandstanding, and
virtue signalling.
Of course, of which so many of those European politicians got PhDs in virtue signalling.
Well, I said yesterday, 3 weeks ago, they'd never heard of a peace deal for Ukraine. Suddenly now they want one.
But with only France and ourselves willing to put boots on the ground, openly stating that, I mean, it's somewhat of a kick in the teeth for Starmer in terms of his actual ability to deliver on something. But I will say he's played this pretty well from a kind of PR perspective.
Exactly.
3 weeks ago.
Let's rewind a couple of months before Donald Trump had taken office for the second time. Nobody was speaking in terms of peace. No one, not a soul, not a politician,
not a sausage
anywhere.
Questions about his commitment to constitutional principles now hang heavily in the air. Baroness Carr's response to Starmer's remarks was extraordinary. The UK's most senior judge did not merely disagree, she condemned his comments as unacceptable and a breach of the duty politicians have to respect judicial independence. By taking the rare step of writing directly to the Prime Minister and using her annual press conference to issue a public warning, she underscored the seriousness of the constitutional line she believed had been crossed. This was no routine spat, it was the judiciary drawing a firm boundary against political interference. So what drove Starmer's attack on the courts? The answer appears overtly political. By framing a narrow procedural issue as an example of judicial activism supposedly enabling Palestinians to enter through loopholes, he crafted a narrative that bolstered his tough on immigration stance while shifting responsibility away from his own government's framework and on to judges applying the law. What he left unsaid was that the ruling had nothing to do with the Ukraine scheme itself. It rested squarely on established human rights law, legislation Parliament had approved in its sovereign authority. The judge was not inventing new rules, but enforcing those already in place. Meanwhile, the reality facing the Gaza family clashed sharply with the political rhetoric. They were not opportunists exploiting a system, but survivors of war whose children had narrowly escaped death and were seeking the safety of relatives willing to shelter them.
Like he's important, but let's be real, Donald Trump will just ignore him if necessary. He's somewhat of an irrelevancy to the grander scheme and the grander negotiations that are happening. I mean, one thing I do find very interesting is the rise of Saudi Arabia.
So Donald Trump has seized the initiative, has led, then so many people have got their knickers in a twist over three geezers having a fallout in a room.
Oh, yeah, because he's a bit rude.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
To which, you know, these negotiations are happening. I think that's a really important aspect that a lot of people haven't really talked about. But, where we are...
I mean, it's interesting with the Saudis.
Think of some of the meetings.
Some of these people never been in meetings where you shout at each other.
Exactly.
Right.
Where you have differences of opinion and robust exchanging of views.
All right.
I've been in many of those.
The Palestinian family, desperate for safety and a chance to live with their relatives, relied on the only legal pathway available to them, navigating the system without any hint of fraud or exploitation. Immigration lawyers and experts were quick to clarify this reality, emphasising that the family had acted entirely within the law. Yet by then, Starmer's misleading narrative had already achieved its political objective, framing the case as a loophole exploited for advantage. What we are witnessing is more than a political manoeuvre. It is a troubling erosion of the separation of powers, a foundational principle designed to ensure that no single branch of government accumulates unchecked authority. By publicly criticising and pressuring judges for rulings that do not align with his political agenda, Starmer risks creating a precedent where judicial decisions are shaped less by law and principle and more by fear of political reprisal, threatening the very integrity of the judiciary. This moment marks democracy at a precarious crossroads. The issue is not confined to a single case or a temporary clash between branches of government, but raises the broader question of whether our legal system will be allowed to be weaponised for political ends. Judicial independence, once undermined, erodes public trust, transforming courts from impartial guardians of justice into obstacles to be circumvented for convenience or gain. The danger extends far beyond Starmer's immediate actions. It is the precedent they set, one that could ripple through future decisions and reshape the balance of power in the UK. The real questions now loom over the nation. Will Parliament assert itself to defend the judiciary? Will the press expose the stakes with clarity? And will the British public recognise the profound consequences of allowing political expediency to override legal principle? The very future of the UK's legal system, and by extension its democracy, hangs in the balance, demanding vigilance, awareness, and a commitment to uphold the rule of law before the erosion becomes irreversible.